All right, yeah, I'm just getting set up. Just need 1 minute. All right. How about now? Can you hear me better now? Someone confirm if the audio is okay now. Can you hear me? All right. Thank you for letting me know. Meta Nomad, you asked me if I'm okay. Yeah, everything's good. Everything is going exactly according to plan, I would say. I'm being somewhat sarcastic, but I'm fine, truly. I mean, I got a lot of people writing me messages right now, random people also that I've never interacted with before, on Twitter and stuff. People are like really concerned, and I appreciate that. Obviously, I mean, it's always nice to receive support, but I mean, I've been watching the culture very closely for quite some time now, and I think, you know, I sort of knew something like this would happen eventually. I don't know why. I don't know why it's low. Maybe it's because I'm talking softly because it's late here. But, I mean, I'll just talk even closer into this. But, yeah, I mean, I appreciate all the support, but I'm not stupid. I mean, I know that there are social norms. I know what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. And, I mean, I have a sense of that. But, you know, the boundaries of what you are allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, the thing is that it keeps shifting, and it is a little bit unstable, and it is a little bit unpredictable. And, you know, I don't know. I knew this would probably happen eventually, but I am pretty surprised that it's happened now over the particular incidents that it's happened over. I definitely wasn't. I think, I don't know. I'm not supposed to talk about the investigation, and I won't be, but I can talk about general public facts. I mean, it's interesting because there's this article that was written in the student newspaper all about it, and it cites a university spokesperson, but my understanding is that it's all confidential. So whatever, I don't really care that much. I don't think that the impact of the SOTN tab is going to be too significant. So whatever, I'm kind of respecting the rules and not talking about the process, but yeah, I would just say, honestly, like, I'm not that interested in it. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's kind of sweet. I have all this time free. Like, I'm trying to tread lightly, but yeah, I have no work to do for some time now. And you know, I continue to be paid, so it's a pretty good deal. I'm just working on my book. I mean, it's actually really good because I owe my literary agent, who I just recently signed a contract with, I owe him revisions on this book project, and I was behind on that, in part because I was getting ready to teach. So now I just have time to do that. I'm just gonna write this damn book and get it done sooner. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, this is not too much of a surprise. I figured something like this would happen eventually because I've always run my mouth in my entire life. I've always just kind of said what I want. And, it's very clear that what you're allowed to say as an academic is decreasing over time. The range is decreasing over time. And so one could predict that something like this would happen if you're the type of person like me who just enjoys and kind of needs to run one's mouth a little bit. So yeah, but I am surprised how quick it happened. I'm surprised this is the straw that broke the camel's back. So that's a little surprising, but in some sense it's fascinating, and it's kind of, it's almost more amusing, the kind of extreme triviality of the incident that broke the camel's back, as it were. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens. Like, if this ends up being a huge fiasco, I would be stunned. I mean, I think it would just be so patently ridiculous that I don't even know, but it would be patently ridiculous enough that I certainly wouldn't feel bad or guilty, and I certainly wouldn't feel ashamed or anything like that. I think it would be an obvious example of administrative overreach personally if this were to become like a major fiasco. But, we'll wait and see. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say? I think it's obviously a little bit stressful. Uncertainty is stressful. But, um, I mean, I don't know. Like, I have a pretty clean conscience, I think. Like, for me, the way that I see it is, look, I'm not a perfect person. I definitely do some things wrong in my life, like everyone does. But I guess something I think about a lot is that, I live a very ethical life in the sense that I put a lot of personal mental effort into reflecting on what it means to be a good person and holding myself um, you know, to a high ethical standard. Like I have an intense and strong personal ethical code. And I have from a young age. I think that is in part because I was raised Catholic and I thank my parents for that a lot. But regardless of where it comes from, I really do live a pretty strongly ethical life. And the benefit of that is that when you really hold yourself to try your best every day to be like a generally decent person and not hurt people and do, live a life that you think is right, at least for the most part, with some imperfections, when you really live that way, you can be pretty confident that, you know, if all of a sudden someone is claiming that you're harming them in some sort of absurd, you know, publicly motivated way, uh, you can be pretty confident that, yeah, no, I probably did not hurt anyone. I'm pretty sure that using a few different words, maybe not the nicest words, I admit, that's fine. But using a few little words here and there that almost all normal people say, my conscience is clean. I'm not bothered by that. I'm not, sorry for that. I'm not, I don't feel bad at all. People call each other retards all the time. It's a slang word. It's not, any disrespect to disabled people. I don't think at all. And yeah, so let's see. I mean, if your conscience is clean and you have a sense of, the strategic landscape enough to basically know in advance that this is coming eventually, then, I'm just kind of chilling. I'm doing my thing. I'm working on the stuff I want to work on and using the time to, yeah, do the stuff that I'm most interested in anyway. Someone asked me earlier in the chat, um, like what does my average day look like? Well, so this is only the third day of my vacation, and it looks like every day in the summer basically. It's what I'm living right now exactly as I do every day that I don't have formal obligations, which is basically a little bit of reading in the morning, emails, and the everyday bureaucracy that I have to do in my own life, and then some form of like focused productive work. That could be like I've been blogging a lot. I don't know if you've noticed, but the blog has been kind of scheduled up with content pretty regularly, and I got some other stuff queued up. I have basically this like massive hard drive of just like notes and kind of dictated thoughts and essay ideas and all this, and just a bunch of stuff that I've kind of piled up over the past few years while I was, busy working. Like, I spent most of the past few years really like buckled down trying to do my sophisticated formal academic research. And I did a good job with that. And, I got a lot of good publications. And then, this is why I'm now kind of starting to come up for air and I'm taking my liberties and I'm kind of saying what I want a little bit more and doing what I want a little bit more because I've already proven myself as an academic. I've already established myself. I'm not going to be any more valuable as a prestige intellectual than I am right now. And so, if I can't get away with saying a few things that I want to say and speaking loosely in the way that I want to be, in the way that I need to be, if I can't do that now, then I'm never going to be allowed to do it. And if that's the case, I don't want this kind of job. So I just want to learn that now. So yeah, I'm just doing what I always do, like what I do in the summer, basically. Read, write blogs, or organize my notes and kind of piece the notes together to try and see what the next like essay or blog I want to kind of work on is. And then this book project that I'm working on, which honestly is really exciting. And frankly, of all the things I'm working on, probably the most valuable and kind of highest impact thing is the book project. Because I think I've told you folks, like I already have a literary agent and he's like a legit, like high level literary agent. So really, I just have to get that book proposal done. He's given me some revisions. And once, who knows, like, you never know what's going to happen with that kind of thing, but he could maybe sell the book to like a big press, and maybe that will just happen and I won't even have to worry about any of this stuff. Or at the very least, whatever happens with it, I have other things in the pipeline that help me not worry so much about whatever the fuck like academia, wants to do with me. It's relatively unimportant to me. The job is fine, but honestly, the job, as far as I'm concerned, like being an academic today, it's only barely worthwhile anyway. Like it's not the worst job for sure. There are definitely worse jobs, no doubt. And in some sense, I'm grateful for having it, but in another sense, I mean, it's not some like ideal, perfect job. Like a lot of people think that it is. A lot of people think it's just like, it's so secure and it's just cushy. And I mean, there are certain aspects to that. Like it is nice that you get a summer. I know a lot of people don't have summers off. I understand the goodness of that and why that's attractive. But the job itself is not, it's really just not any better than like most office jobs. Like most of, a good deal of what we actually have to do is pretty basic, like bureaucratic office work. And so it's like, my feeling is kind of like, if academia decides that I do not fit inside of it, I'll just infer that I don't really want to be in academia. And at the very least, I could get like some bureaucratic office job that's basically like equally annoying types of work, but that pays way better, basically, So if I had to do that for a little bit till I figure something else out, that's fine. I can do that. Yes, McCrum's psychoanalysis. That is something I wanted to get to in this live stream. I actually have a little commentary planned on McCrum's psychoanalysis, if you want to call it that. I don't know. What are the other questions here? How do I organize my notes and work? I don't use Evernote. I'm not a huge fan of Evernote for the reason that I feel like it's pretty slow. I have mad notes and I clip stuff all the time. And whenever I open up Evernote, it takes too long to open up, and especially the web version. I just feel like it's not really very useful or efficient when you have a large volume of things. That's just been my experience. But actually, to be fair, Evernote is a small part of my workflow because it has of all the apps that I've used, Evernote has the best web clipping functionality. So for the specific task of you're on the internet and different web pages and you want to take a selection from something and just get that selection into an archive that you can manage, it has the best tools for that, because sometimes you want a bookmark, sometimes you want a selection, sometimes you want, whatever, the whole page, sometimes you want a screenshot. The web clipping functionality for Evernote is really good. So I do actually pay for the like slight premium Evernote that lets you do some stuff with that. But my real workhorse for that actually is DevonThink. So I have like some workflows. I use the application called Hazel, which basically just automates moving files around under different types of conditions. And I use like a bunch of things. I won't get super nerdy on you about like all the ways that I connect these different apps, but I have a pretty dope workflow that basically allows me to anything I come across on the internet. I know exactly where to clip it, and I often do run it through Evernote, but then I have Hazel move copies of things into DevonThink Pro. And DevonThink is kind of the big workhorse for all of my notes because it's really efficient. And you can kind of throw everything into DevonThink and search way better and quicker and easier. So yeah, maybe one day I can geek out on you and tell you like all my crazy workflows, but I don't think I feel like getting into that tonight. But I mean, if people are interested in that, don't hesitate to ask. Right, so I guess Marco says, I guess that's what tenure is supposed to be, right? You prove you're not a useless twat, and then you get to say controversial shit. Oh, that reminds me, actually. So Xenogothic asked me just a moment ago on Twitter. I don't know if Xenogothic is in here right now, but he asked me, "What's this tenure thing you're talking about?" You know, the implication being that in England they don't have tenure, and that's kind of true. So the American tenure system is like much more generous. It's much more secure. And technically, the British system doesn't have, they don't use the word tenure, but they do have a system and norms that are basically equivalent to tenure in UK academia. It's called permanency. So when you first enter academia in the UK, you're what's called on probation, and that's a 3-year period where they could fire you like casually if they wanted to. And then after that 3-year period, if you don't get any trouble and you do well and all of that, then you go up for review. And once you get off probation, you become permanent. And permanent is basically the British version of tenure. So like when UK universities try to court American PhD students, such as myself, they tell you that basically it's the British version of tenure. So I have that. I am the British version of tenure. So, all right, Kevin here's that Evernote might be making itself faster by using the technology that Spotify uses. Dude, while we're talking about Spotify quickly, and then I'll talk about McCrum's psychoanalysis. I've been kind of pruning my Spotify, and I've noticed that its recommendations are much better. I read these articles about like what Spotify actually uses to make its guesses about like what you're going to desire for the recommended playlists that it automatically gives you. Its recommendation engine. And I had a bunch of songs that were saved in my library from like a way back, or that I just kind of did casually, but that I don't actually really like that much and that don't really reflect, my tastes. And I removed all of those and added also more songs that I do like and that do reflect my taste. And the suggested playlist that they give you, they do like these daily mixes, and they do these like the Discover Weekly. I found that it got like more refined, I think. That's my anecdotal interpretation anyway. What's up, Petra Allen? So, all right, then let's, before I talk about McCrum's psychoanalysis, to use a generous description of his writing, I should tell you about a few events we got planned. So reminder that I'm going to be live streaming with Kantbot tomorrow, a little bit earlier than right now. Actually, it's going to be at 11:30 p.m. in the UK, which is 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So right now it's 1:30 a.m. in the UK. So yeah, the event is already up. You can go and receive a notification when it goes live. Other ones I have scheduled imminently are I'm going to be talking with Trad Queen on October 13 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So yes, about the same time. Mind you, I'm staying up very late for these. That's how committed I am to the stream life. It's like about midnight for me. But hey, I can handle it. And Robert Mariani is now going to be joining me on the stream on October 14th, so the day after Trad Queen. And that's going to be at 1:30 p.m. on the West Coast, which is 9:30 p.m. in the UK, which is 4:30 p.m. Eastern. All right, and ones that we got in the lineup, which I don't have dates for yet, but RS Backer has confirmed he's going to do the live stream. We're setting up a date now, and we don't have that confirmed yet. I'm going to do a live stream with this guy, Benjamin Boyce, who I don't know too much about, but he's got like a decent little number of subscribers on YouTube, and he seems to kind of be like interested in somewhat similar topics. I don't really know that much about him, but I've interacted with him before. Seems fine. Seems a nice guy. So I'm curious to learn more about him. So we're going to do one. We talked about that. I think we agreed. We just haven't found a time yet. What else? There was someone else. Oh yeah, David John Redden, or John David Redden. I forget. This person was recommended to me, and I looked into him, and he seemed interesting. So yeah, he also agreed to do it, and we're setting up a time. So we got those coming up, and then yeah, I still have like a massive list of people that I want to get on, but I just need more time. And yeah. Am I actually going to ask Kantbot any interesting questions? Well, you tell me questions you want me to ask him. I'll ask him. Yeah, I told him I want to ask Kantbot about his larger project. I think that's kind of what my interest has become on all of these live streams. It's kind of converged, I think, towards like I just want to know what people are about. You know, I want to kind of I want to make a kind of one-stop shop for weird people on the internet to have like a one conversation where they kind of just explain their whole shtick, like their trajectory, their background, where they're coming from, what they're trying to do, you know, their placement in the ideological, you know, internet subcultures, and yeah, and what they're doing moving forward, how they see things, what they're trying to do in the future, you know, just I'm genuinely curious about like who people are and what they're trying to do. So yeah, I usually just ask questions to that effect. Or sometimes there's a different, I guess, like type of live stream I like to do, which when it's with people that, you know, I'm really interested in what they think about specific things, then I might like pick their brain about more specific topics. In the case of Kantbot, I don't know too much. I'm more just curious about his persona. So I want to ask him things like why does he love German idealism so much, and what, you know, why should people care about German idealism, and what he thinks about Trump and his placement in, you know, like the internet subculture. Like, I guess he kind of reps Frog Twitter, but I just want to kind of hear in his own words how he places himself. But yeah, I mean, if you people have questions that you want me to ask people, that's really useful for me. So feel free to type them in. Also, I should say I have a Discord server, so if anyone wants to like feed into these kinds of conversations, and you want to tell me guests I should get or make suggestions about questions I should ask people or whatever, if you want to kind of like participate in the stuff I'm doing, send me a DM on Twitter. I'll get you in the Discord server. And also, I'd be remiss to not mention big thanks to all the patrons who have like joined to give me a little bit of money each month. That's super helpful, and it's especially useful and nice to have. It's very emboldening in this moment where like I'm starting to get heat from the institutions, and you know, like I said, I'm really not too bothered. I'll ride it out regardless, and I'm gonna keep doing my thing regardless. I'm not too phased, but yeah, having like a handful of people who give me money each month is definitely encouraging and emboldening. And so yeah, if there's anyone out there listening to this who, you know, really likes what I'm doing, if you want to make sure I keep doing it, that would be very encouraging and useful to check out my Patreon. But I really don't care. I'm not going to pressure anyone, and I'm not going to shill that too hard, just so you know. But I do want to thank everyone for sure. So yeah, let me know guests. Let me know questions you want me to ask them, whatever. So let's move on to the content of the evening, shall we? First thing is we have to talk about Mr. McCrum's series of takedown articles that he's churning out. And I think this time we'll look at the most recent article, and you know, we'll give it a close read, shall we? So I have it pulled up here already. It is called, first of all, that's a lovely photo. It's called The Sublime Justin of Ideology. He's very clever, that McCrum's. You gotta really be impressed. That young man can turn a phrase. So, Mr. Crumpler. I read this a couple times, really trying to get a good grasp on like what his beef is exactly. And I have to say, it's hard to get. You see, Mr. Crumpler is one of those guys who's very educated, very smart guy. I talked to him, did a live stream. I like him. So he can turn a phrase, for sure. And, you know, he can say some sentences that are, you know, impressive, I think. Fun to read. Just, it feels deep, you know. But then I have to admit that even reading it twice, it's kind of hard for me to grasp what exactly is the bone of his contention with me. In particular, you know, he's made strong claims that I'm like a secret fascist, basically. And that's a major claim. And I guess, like, you know, he says some things that are not totally insane. And as I said, he can turn a nice phrase. But I'm just not really seeing, you know, the meat of the fascism argument, personally. So, for instance, like, I think I highlighted this article, this text, I should say, as possibly a nice kind of summary of the article, or if there's one part that seemed to be the bone of the contention that I could find in this most recent piece, it's this one. So to honor Mr. Crumpler, I'll even read it out loud. The apolitical ideological fantasy is exactly what shields the underlying reactionary tendencies from being approached and challenged. So I think this is one of his big ideas, that he thinks, you get this in the first article he wrote also, that he thinks that I'm kind of doing a postmodern thing where I have all of these different signifiers that don't really make a lot of sense, and it's really just to, I don't know, be, marketable to different types of people and to make myself seem innocent and harmless, but actually I'm shielding reactionary tendencies, to use his words here. And I mean, let's try to charitably develop his position. So we'll carry on with it. Here, the fantasy is represented by the subject, the imaginary regular guy, implicitly white and male, but if, when pressed, it could go other ways. Neither Democrat nor Republican, naive and innocent, a complete tabula rasa that is besieged by the other, who isn't like us, doesn't talk like us, the grotesque and excessive SJW, who imposes a tyrannical morality of resentment and suffering over the very essence of language. So, right, so this ideological fantasy is what shields the subject Justin himself, as well as all of us as spectators, from the unfathomable real, the impenetrable, excessive, horrific desire of the other. I mean, that sounds cool. Maybe. I mean, maybe if I'm doing that, it makes me seem like deep and sophisticated. Maybe I'm doing that kind of crazy, deep, psychological, four-dimensional chess with the public. But, I mean, look, it means little for me to say that that doesn't relate to my own experience, because he's using a psychoanalytic frame here, and so naturally I would not identify with anything that he's saying. And the more that I reject or disagree with his diagnosis, the more in it he will find symptomatic, evidence of precisely what he's saying. But, I mean, I don't know. I'll think about it. Maybe it's true. I guess what I would do is give an alternative explanation, the way that I see it, and people can just kind of, I guess ultimately people just have to weigh up which one, makes the most sense to them. Maybe they're both right in some way, but here's what I think. I'll tell you what I think. Hang on, let me catch up on the chat. Oh, sorry. I'm not being able to read it while I'm thinking. He's saying that your syncretism, this is Left Cat talking, your sympathies to right-wing ideologues, along with your ironic distance, makes you fascist. Okay. I'm just going back up through the chat. Oh, thanks, Michael James. Yeah, I'm taking the shit over, son. All right. So the whole I don't know what he is saying thing you keep doing is dishonest. Okay. Left, thank you. Oh, thank you, Left Cat, for, your frank additions to or clarifications of his argument. So, okay, cool. Let me clear things away and focus on talking about this. So, all right. So that's the claim then, that I have sympathies with right-wing ideologues, and I use ironic distance, and the syncretism is an ironic distance is kind of like a playful cover for my sympathies with right-wing ideologues, and that is therefore fascist. Okay. Well, let me think. First of all, you don't have to say that I'm dishonest, because I'm trying to think through this, and I'm doing it live, for Christ's sake. So, cut me some slack. When I say I don't know what he's saying, I'm being honest, for sure. So, okay, the way that I understand what I'm doing is that I don't know fully what I think. I have a few hunches about a few different things. and they're contradictory. And I'm trying to sort them out by building on them or extrapolating from them in creative ways. And the ways that seem to work and seem good, I kind of stick with. And the things that don't make sense or seem bad, I kind of uh, leave behind and move forward. So, you know, I don't think I don't think I have many sympathies with very many right wing ideologues. I think that there are some aspects of cultural conservatism that are um, somewhat systematically uh, suppressed by the dominant uh, establishment liberal, intelligentsia culture. And in any social system or social moment where the dominant culture has a certain leaning, then there's going to be intrinsically some value in that which is relatively underplayed. So, in my view, our culture is very socially liberal, and therefore, it just stands to reason that there are important truths that a lot of people are underrating or undervaluing or are under aware of in general. And a lot of the problems that we're observing play out right now are going to have a kind of socially liberal character to them because that is the dominant kind of educated culture. So if you want to think critically about what's wrong and you want to talk about that with educated people, a lot of the action, a lot of the opportunity for critique and interesting, insightful kind of personal, revelation or discovery or whatever is going to it just makes sense that it's going to be disproportionately hiding in some culturally conservative tendencies, which are relatively underplayed at the moment in the current cultural context. Like I genuinely temperamentally, I am a left wing person in the sense of the personality traits that make someone a lefty or right winger. I'm very high in openness. I'm not very bothered by foreigners. I don't at all mind people who don't look like me. I'm actually quite high on my enjoyment of diversity and my tolerance for out groups and stuff like that. I'm very high in that. That's a left wing trait. So temperamentally, I am just genuinely a left winger. The fact that I do live streams with all different types of people, including some that are pretty far right, like, so for instance, probably the most right wing one I had, or especially the most problematic live stream that I've had, would just be the one with Storm King, where like for one moment he said some stuff about like white people. Like that's like the most right wing any of my stuff really has got. I did a talk with Nick Land, and of course, like, yeah, he's very right wing. But the talk that we did, like what I was interested in, what I was actually trying to figure out with him, was not right wing at all, and I was actually occupying quite a left wing pole in that conversation. So I mean, if you actually look at the content of everything I'm saying and writing and putting out, it's very temperamentally open, liberal, socially. It's liberal in that sense. It's open to diversity. Like that is a left wing trait in the temperamental sense of the ideological terms. On the other hand, I am Catholic, I think. At the very least, I'm culturally Catholic, and I am really working through I think a more serious type of commitment, and I'm still working that out. And I don't really consider myself like accountable to other people on that. But I do think that for instance, it's not obvious to me that abortion is totally unproblematic, I would say. That's not at all obvious to me. That now, does that mean I have like some hidden like right-wing sympathies that go deeper than that? I mean, it could mean that in the sense that like everyone possibly has depth to them that they don't really understand until at some point that it's drawn out. But I'm not pulling any punches, and I think that's the key thing that I would say in response to McCrum's critique. I'm not pulling any punches. I swear I'm really not. When people ask me questions, I tell them what I think. I write blog posts about what I'm interested in whatever angle seems interesting and seems true. So like I have some culturally conservative components to my feelings, to my thoughts, to my picture of the world. And I'm also like temperamentally very like left wing. I'm also I have strong high preferences for egalitarianism and equality, and I have a deep and abiding commitment to the equality of all people, in a fundamental, almost religious sense. I think that all people have all people have equal dignity, in the sense that we we come from dust and we will return to dust, all of us equally. So yeah, I think there are differences between people. People have different capacities, and if you want to organize systems or subsystems in which everyone can be treated optimally, you have to take seriously certain inequalities and aptitudes that just fundamentally do exist between individuals. Yeah, I do think that today that gets you mapped as a kind of right wing, pro hierarchy, traditionalist authoritarian or something like that. But I don't think that's the case. I think that's other people's mappings. I think people are too quick to map individual policy preferences or individual political viewpoints onto this like molar ideological like single dimension. I think it's really stupid. I think what we have today is the technology that allows us to just completely opt out of that game. I mean, I don't care if you people play that game. I don't care if McCrum wants to like try to map the variety of things that I think and write and say onto a two-dimensional plane and use psychoanalysis to give like an intellectualized version of all of the deeper things that he's going to infer are hiding beneath the surface. But I mean, that's fine. I really don't mind. But if you ask me anything, I will tell you what I think is the answer. And I'm not coy. So that's what I don't like about, or I mean, I don't dislike it. Like I said, I actually like reading Mike McCrum's pieces. I think they're funny and interesting. It's always kind of amusing and fascinating to see how someone else sees you. And he's articulate and he's thoughtful, so he writes interesting sentences and paragraphs, and I like reading them. I think the person he's describing, I don't recognize it as me, but it's fascinating that he could see it that way. I'm not offended at all. I don't mind it. But one thing that I think is really wrong, or that he really doesn't understand, is that, in all honesty, my project, what I'm trying to do with my whole overarching project, is absolute and radical sincerity. I'm trying to be as honest as I possibly can about the diversity of things that I think and feel, and I'm just trying to put them out there and then chip away at one at a time and try to make them converge over time. I'm trying to find, like the truth that sits at the bottom of, my somewhat culturally conservative ideas or leanings, and then my kind of very communist, open-minded leftist temperament that I have. So yeah, I mean, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do that like live in an open and honest way. I think it's confusing to people because like it's just like not a lot of people do it this way, and people often like will only present their viewpoints after like extensive consideration and in a kind of like polished package. But I just lay out what whatever I'm thinking, and sure, it's going to sound contradictory, but it's not because I'm hiding. It's just because I'm trying to figure it out. So I mean, that's a quick take. Let me see what people are saying. I'll take it from the top. Let's see. Left Cat. Would you say that your fundamental principles are more left wing or right wing? I would say that temperamentally, in terms of personality traits, I'm kind of like a mix. But in terms of principles, I genuinely, I mean, I don't want to sound like a corny centrist or something, because I'm not interested in centrism also. I think that's kind of dumb. But I don't think it makes sense to have principles that are left wing or right wing. I just don't. I think your principle, especially if you're an intellectual, if you're a thinker and a writer, your principle should just be trying to figure out the truth. And I'm not saying that we can get beyond biases. I'm not saying that I have some sort of like bird's eye view that's neither left nor right, or better than left and right. But I think when you're trying to think about what's true, you should be actively trying to disengage from like identity investments such as left or right. I mean, so that's honestly not a dodge. It's just you're asking me specifically if my fundamental principles are more left wing or right wing. That's I don't think about my fundamental principles as one or the other. I mean, look, I'll tell you explicitly here. Let's break it down to show you I'm not being coy. I guess some of my fundamental principles are left wing, and some of my fundamental principles are right wing. So I'll give you an example. Like, I believe very deeply in the absolute ethical necessity for the most equal distribution of opportunities, and I believe in I believe that everyone has a strong obligation to everyone else to do everything in their power to guarantee everyone else the best possible life opportunities, I would say. In other words, like I'm a strong egalitarian in that sense, and that's a left wing principle, I think, and on the other hand, for instance, I think that life is precious. For instance, I think that is essentially a religious belief. I think, for instance, like I'm not a utilitarian. For instance, I don't believe that the maximization of pleasure is healthy or good. I think that suffering is necessary and inevitable, and I think that you know, I'm deontological in that sense, and that ultimately ends up being a kind of right wing, that ends up having right wing connotations. Like if you think that there are values that are more important than kind of like, rational kind of calculation, then you're usually going to be that's essentially going to be boiling down to something that is like religious and traditional. And so that I would say is essentially a right wing principle, you could say. But my egalitarianism and also my openness, like as I said, I could care less about kind of like ethnic identity and stuff like that. That like I genuinely feel strongly that all people, no matter what, are equally valuable. So again, like that's a deep principle, and that's a left-wing principle, I would say. That has a clear left-wing connotation. But the stuff I was saying before about, the existence of deep ethical necessities that are not reducible to, the promotion of pleasure, and are not that are not reducible to scientific validation, that essentially ends up being a right-wing principle, I would say. So, I mean, I'm trying to figure out how you make sense of these things. I don't know that in advance. That's why you set out to have an intellectual life, and that's why you write, and that's why you read and try to figure things out. Like, that's all I'm trying to do. So, if you want to call that left wing, I don't care. If you want to call it right wing, that's fine too. But I'm certainly not hiding anything. So, what else? How can you simultaneously call yourself a reactionary if you believe in egalitarianism? All thinkers typically thought of reactionary, from de Maistre to Moldbug, have critiqued it. Yeah, I'm not calling myself a reactionary, Jack. I've never called myself a reactionary. Let's see. Who else is chiming in here? Chris Hokima says, McCrum's allegation of microfascism is not an accusation of some hidden right-wing traits, but an analysis of a tendency towards power in the Deleuzian sense. So is that a prediction then? Is that a prediction that I'm going to increasingly warm up to right-wing people, that I'm increasingly going to be in bed with, if you will, right-wing people? Because that would be valuable. A prediction is valuable. So if that's what that means, then we can check back in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And if I'm a right winger, then McCrum's would be correct. And you could consider his insights prescient. But if I don't, if the idea is that it's a tendency towards power, Okay. Or I was probably interpreting that wrong. Like, I guess what you mean is, like latent in what I'm saying and thinking is some drive to take over or something, some drive for power in me. Um, Again, how about we wait and see if that's a prediction? Then, uh, if I'm like running some like crazy militant death cult or something, and I'm saying that I'm like the second coming of Christ or something like that, or if I'm like trying to take state power or some shit, anytime in the next few years, then we can call McCrum's critiques prescient. And if I'm not, then would he be willing to say that he's wrong? And because here, look, I think the idea that you should be able to formulate your beliefs in a way that produces predictions, I think that's actually really useful. Like, I wouldn't want to reduce McCrum's brilliant, humanities education to a kind of like less wrong rationalist Robin Hanson mode or anything like that. I don't think you have to be like Robin Hanson to be legitimate, but it is a useful exercise. Like, could McCrum's critique imply predictions that he and I could make a bet on? That's a really useful heuristic. I would be interested to think about that if you wanted to. What else do we have in the chat? Michael James says, you advocated for us to adopt capitalist kings, and some people freaked. I'm not down with it either, but at least you hypothesized a sincere model. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call them capitalist kings. I would call them people that are really good at producing shit so that they can let us not work. And they would be really cool for doing that. And I would treat them accordingly, as they would be, in fact, really, really cool. And I would really, really like them if they could make so much shit and sell it on the open market that they could let me just like write blogs and write my books and stuff all day. If they could do that for me, that would earn them extraordinary esteem, and I would be prepared to give it to them. And I think other people should also be happy to live under that kind of principle. But I wouldn't call them capitalist kings. I would just call them, they're better at making money, so they get credit for that socially. And I'm better at other things that they can't do. And they would value me for that. What else do we have? So left cat, is that satisfying to you? Because you say that you're not trying to accuse me of being left or right, but you're only trying to pin it down because your answers have been sort of evasive. Is that useful for you? I mean, I'm not dodging anything, but I'm happy to clarify. You give me follow-up questions if you want. I'm genuinely happy to keep going. I don't know what else to say. Charlie, people are referring to me as fascist. I'm not sure. Personally, I'm not a fan of psychoanalysis, so I'm not going to psychoanalyze McCrum's. As to what his motives are or why he's referring to me as a fascist, people could speculate all day. I mean, if you wanted, I could give you my own psychoanalysis of McCrum's. Maybe I should. But, I mean, look, I read a lot of psychoanalysis. I read a lot of Freud and a lot of Lacan, and I enjoyed it. I think it's very fascinating and kind of useful, but I don't think it's as good as a method for kind of like critically opposing in a kind of ethical way other people's work. Like, I don't know. I think it's too slippery. It's too easy. Like if you have high verbal fluidity and you've read enough psychoanalysis, or if you've even just like read a few Zizek books, it gets very, very easy rather quickly to be able to just, spin out critiques left and right of whatever you want. You can write a Lacanian critique of anything I give you if you wanted to. You could find fascism in anything you want. And I think that's the ultimate problem with psychoanalysis. I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand at all. I think, Freud and Lacan are really brilliant and worth reading, fascinating stuff. It is useful in some sense for opening your eyes to, I think, certain dimensions of human experience, and definitely for like, thinking about human behavior and the relationships between our own thinking and our own experience of life and our own choices and behaviors. I think it's too hard to pin it on anyone else externally. Like if you're honest with yourself and you have like a self-aware relationship with yourself, I think psychoanalysis is most useful as a vocabulary for understanding yourself and for thinking through your own shit, basically. I think, as a tool for reading someone else who you don't know really well, and who, you might have your own motivated reasons for, agreeing with or disagreeing with. I think it's just hugely, hugely limited. It's not scientific in that regard. It's just too easy to basically use it as a shell to say whatever you want. And yeah, that's kind of what I think is going on. But what else? What else we got? Left Cat, I would really like to hear from you what else I could say to satisfy you, since you're kind of repping McCrum's perspective here. I haven't been too cozy with like any right wingers, to be honest. I've talked with a fair number of them, but I don't think that there's much evidence of any kind of fascist sympathies on my part. That's why I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely open to critique. I'll definitely think about it, but also like I don't know how much people know this, but I'm an actual anti-fascist. Like I'm actively involved with the Southampton anti-fascist group. Like I've been a member for years, and I am Antifa. Like I don't know if people get that. I actually go to protests and physically resist fascists. I've done it multiple times over the past like several years. A little bit, mostly in the UK in my experience, and a little bit in the US also. So I mean, is the hypothesis like, does that data not matter for like a diagnosis of my fascism? I would be curious, like, what would McCrum say to that? Would McCrum say that my years of anti-fascism it's all like performance? It's all just like a postmodern ironic deception? I don't know. I mean, again, this is kind of the problem. No, Left Cat, I mean, I want to satisfy you. I know specifically on the point of, do you think that I'm still evading? It's okay if you don't fully understand, or if you feel like, I haven't fully articulated myself or whatever. But that's what I want to pin you on, Left Cat. Would you still say that I'm evading? Because I feel like I'm doing my genuine best to, think about the questions and give you non-evasive answers. All right, let's go to the next topic of discussion, which is this guy Loki. Do you folks know who this is? The guy on Twitter, Loki. I don't know much about him, but he thinks I'm a Fed. Apparently, there's a little bit of chatter from like a few people, I think, on the internet, people who think I'm a Fed. I think that's just hilarious. But for instance, I want to show you. Take a look at this. I brought it up here. Oh. There we go. This guy Loki the Accuser, at Loki Julianus. He's talking about me here. It's the lack of subculture specific knowledge, which is very odd. Dun dun dun. I've never met a hipster in my entire life who doesn't have a mental discography of like 10,000 albums. In a blog post, he said he couldn't even name his favorite band. Also, doesn't seem to have any tattoos. Well, first of all, I have tattoos. I guess he just doesn't watch all my live streams. Whatever. Apparently Loki's concern for the data of my biography is as low as Mr. McCrum's is. But yeah, I mean, that's just hilarious reasoning. Like this is just like a whole chain of spacious reasoning. First of all, I mean, I don't like present who said I'm a hipster? Like, I mean, I don't care if people call me that. In some sense, I get it, but I don't know anything about music. I'm bad at music. I don't know how to play it. I like listening to it, but I don't really know anything about it, and I don't have a passion for it. Um, so it's like, why would my knowledge of music or lack of knowledge of music have anything to do with like the veracity of who I say I am? Um, in fact, there's something that this tweet by Loki and this idea that I'm a Fed, there's something that this has in common with McCrum's critique of me as a micro-fascist. And you know what that thing is? It's called paranoia. There's a lot of that on the internet nowadays. There's a lot of that generally nowadays. People are paranoid. People just imagine all of this stuff about other people that they don't even know. And, you know, people's imagination can just run wild. It's like it's on a continuum with all of the conspiracy theories that are so popular right now, I think. So, I mean, the idea that I'm a Fed is just completely ridiculous. Of course, I probably would say that if I was a Fed, but whatever. I mean, I know if people think I'm a Fed, I don't care. What else? Yeah, I think that Loki and his accusation are about as credible as McCrum's accusation that I'm a micro-fascist. I mean, look, one thing I would say in McCrum's defense is that, in some sense, anyone who thinks about politics passionately and tries to be radical in the penetration of their thinking is going to, there's always going to be the risk of a fascist line of flight. Like that's what Deleuze and Guattari write about. That's like one of the things that they're like really trying to kind of figure out and alert you to. There's always that. There's always a threat of lapsing into kind of fascist reterritorializations. But I'm aware of that, and it's equally true for anyone who's like thinking seriously and trying to do any kind of like meaningful intellectual or political project. So yeah, I'm not above that, but I'm not like especially more vulnerable to it than anyone else, I don't think. Mark says that, Mark, you're shocked that I'm Antifa. Well, I'll be clear that that doesn't mean that I support everything any anti-fascist group has ever done. I'd be the first to admit there are definitely groups out there right now that are Antifa, that are doing shit that I think is not at all justified by the anti-fascist philosophy. There's a certain idea that, to be a militant anti-fascist, you have to, basically be aggressive and almost offensive to anything that, someone tells you is fascist. And that's obviously a bad phenomenon. It's very obvious where that ends up in equilibrium. That's a long run dynamic that we do not want to see play out. And so I think there's a problem right now where what counts as fascist is a bar that is getting lowered each year, and I think that's a massive problem. So yeah, no, I mean, I'm an anti-fascist in the sense that if neo-Nazis, like actual fascists, come into my town, yeah, I'm gonna meet them in the streets. If there are neo-Nazis marching through the streets of where I live, yeah, with other, able-bodied people, I'm going to go meet them physically for sure. Like I believe in that, and to this day I do. Does that mean going to a Trump rally and hitting people who like Milo Yiannopoulos with bike clocks? That's just totally insane, and I think that's something totally different. I think that's the problem that we have to. Left Cat, you say this is the sort of shit that you think is evasive. Oh, everyone can be accused of being fascist. I'm not. I didn't say that, dude. I said I recognize everyone can possibly lapse into it. And I'm aware of that. I'm saying that I don't think that anything I'm saying or doing is particularly closer to it than anyone else. I mean, look, if you want to start accusing people about like motives and stuff like that, then to be honest, to be perfectly honest, um, I'm giving you the caveat that this is not my preferred line of reasoning. I don't take it too seriously, and I think it's kind of a cop out, so I'm not really doing it. But if I wanted to play the game that McCrum's is playing and that you're kind of playing now, Left Cat, I would say um, McCrum's is just playing the SJW game basically. It's easy to it's easy to find in anyone's work, like it today. Anyone who's thinking or writing outside of the orbit of kind of like approved leftist academic circles, and you're like trying to figure out, what is this mold bug stuff? What is this Nick Land stuff? What's true about it? Like if that's what you're trying to do, it's actually a low hanging fruit to find some sort of like critique of fascism, because you're trafficking in, all of the kind of moralistic concerns that people have right now that are valuable right now and that people respond positively to right now. So, yeah, I mean, if you really want to get into the game of like questioning people's motives and looking for latent, hidden threats, I mean, I can do that too, and then it can just become a game of that. So, I don't think that's really useful. Like, I'm not going to do that. But I think there might be a little bit of that here too. So, whatever. I have read Dark Deluxe by Andrew Culp. Yes, as a matter of fact. And yeah, I don't really have too much to say about it. It was interesting. I think I don't really see Deleuze as dark personally, but it was a creative little book. I don't think there was anything especially bad or wrong or incorrect about it. It's not the way that I relate to Deleuze, but I got what he was going for, and I think it's fine to have creative readings. Like I think people should extract from the stuff they like the particular dimensions that they find the most useful or interesting or exciting, and there's nothing wrong with kind of like painting that kind of partial portrait and saying, here's here's the version of someone that I think is the coolest. That's how I interpret a book like that. Do I have a list of recommended reading? A lot of people ask me this, and I don't have anything handy. I might do something like that, since a lot of people ask me that. But yeah, Tech Cocaine. I agree with Tech Cocaine that I think what Crumps is doing is fairly tongue in cheek, and I think he knows it also. Sorry, I'm getting hot in here. I think I agree with that. I think he's mostly trying to play games a little bit. I think he's being provocative. I think that I don't think he actually thinks I'm a fascist, in other words. Because he knows me. I mean, we talked like at length. I think he knows I'm not a fascist. Loki doesn't believe Aristotle was a real person. Yes, well, Left Cat, I appreciate your questions, and I believe I have taken definite positions. I reject fascism. I'm an anti-fascist. I believe in equality. I don't care about my whiteness. I mean, I'm being extremely clear. I think that's all there is to it. All right, folks, I'm getting tired. I think, yes, he's playing to his brand. I agree, but I mean, who's not in some sense nowadays? It's 2:19 here. I better wrap it up, folks. This has been fun. I appreciate it. I'm gonna do these more. I have a lot of time on my hands now. So thanks for hanging out with me. Check back in. What it means to reject fascism is that when I see people being fascist, I say that I disagree with it. If I see people being forcefully fascist, like neo-Nazis in the street, I put on my face mask and dress in all black and meet them in the streets. Like, that's the definition of what it means to reject fascism. And I have a track record of doing that. So I don't know how more concrete I could be. All right. I think that's all for now. Folks, thank you. It's been real. I will we'll pick this up another time. No, it's not annoying, Left Cat. It's all good. I just think I think it's peculiar. I'm curious about what is the underlying miscommunication thing or problem going on, because given that I genuinely see my project as having a lot to do with a kind of deep and radical sincerity and openness and frankness, and I'm going for a kind of authenticity. Like, that is what I value, and that's what I'm trying to perform in some sense. And so for people to accuse me of like playing coy games or of hiding something or of having latent intentions or motivations that I'm kind of shielding with like postmodernism or irony or coyness. Um, I don't see that. I just don't see that. And I'm not offended, but I'm more, one, I'm curious like what I could possibly do to debate it, because it seems like if you just believe that someone is a fascist or they're hiding something, you can believe that forever, no matter what they say or do. So is it that kind of situation where like no matter how clear I am, people are going to think that? In which case, that's fine. I'll just give up like trying to communicate on that point. Um, and I'm also just kind of curious, like what is going on under the hood? Like, how could I appear to be coy and like I'm shielding or hiding things when I feel like, I mean, think about it this way. Like for like writers or whatever, like, and thinkers or whatever you want, I don't even know what kind of categories to use for who I am or what I do or whatever. But for like people that are like trying to develop a political perspective that are working today, who could you name who's like more open and transparent than me? Think about that. I mean, I'm not bragging or anything, but I'm more available for direct questioning, and I give direct, like, live responses to more people at more times than fucking any academic, for sure. And even any, like, other, like, I can't think of anyone who's, like, trying to build a political perspective who is like more, lays themselves out there than I do. So that's why it's very odd that would receive accusations of coyness, or accusations of hiding something or having some like ulterior motives or secret political project. I don't get it. I actually think people like McCrum's might be misdiagnosing me for the exact. They might be like exactly wrong. In other words, they might be like 180 degrees wrong, which is to say that I'm actually so open and so transparent, and I actually lay out my thoughts so, you know, unpackaged, that it's almost confusing, because it's so rare for like intellectuals to do that kind of stuff all the time. And so I think people like McCrum's probably see all the stuff that I'm dropping, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to him, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me yet. I'm trying to figure it out. But since it doesn't make a lot of sense to him, he's just like, oh, this must be some sort of like ulterior motive, four-dimensional chess game that he's playing. Must be a fascist hiding underneath it. Like, first of all, like Techo Kane said, I don't think I actually believe that. I don't think McCrum thinks I'm a fascist. And second of all, yeah, I think it's just McCrum's way of dealing with the uncertainty of not being able to make heads or tails of the different positions that I'm trying to grope my way through. I think that's a much more coherent way to understand what McCrum is actually thinking, or trying to say, and a lot of other people too, because I think he's giving voice to something I've heard other people say before too. A lot of people think that I'm like, like Schwund form, for instance. I've heard him say this sort of thing before. So I think I just gave the diagnosis of that makes them that to me is the most reasonable inference about, I think, what's really going on. I'll take the bait and take this one last position. Left Cat says, you have a set of political positions. When people ask how you oppose fascism, they want an explanation which has something to do with those principles. Okay, I believe in autonomy. I believe tremendously in autonomy. I think I'm not into control. I don't have any, like, I certainly don't care for the nation state, which you could argue is a defining feature of fascism. at least fascism understood in a particular 20th century sense. Right. Positions, principles, they're very similar. My position is that I think, okay, I think you're just trolling. I'm pretty sure Left Cat is just trying to rile me up now. So I think I've given you enough good faith, energy, and attention. So it's all good. Either way, we can pick this up another time. All right, folks. Take it easy. I wish you all the best. Signing off. What? Okay. Sorry, I'm seeing your last message now. I'm not. We can do it if you want. Yeah, Frankie Disco. I think that's right. Yeah, sure. I'll give you one more response. I'm not into the nation state. That's a pretty that's an anti-fascist position. I oppose fascism with the principle or position of individual autonomy. You know, I don't believe in like submerging like I don't think individuals should submerge themselves in larger groups, whether it be the group or the ethnicity or the nation state. I'm against that, like point blank. What else? Um, I'm high in compassion. I'm relatively high in compassion. I actually like have a lot of temperamentally in terms of my personality traits. Am I care a lot about like looking after the poor and the weak. I mean, I have very little interest in a kind of like social Darwinian kind of attitude, which is highly correlated with fascist viewpoints. Like I think communities are obligated to take care of their weakest. I mean, I don't. These are all like extremely um, explicit positions or principles that are anti-fascist. So I think that's all for now. Thanks for hanging with me. I'm gonna do more of these probably a little bit more often now that I have free time. So yeah, check back. See you folks later.